that we would like to see us move past these colored maps and all this stuff. We know it's coming, and to start really with some conceptual design, conceptual cost, and what it really means, and get it on paper so we can start. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think Mr. Hagmark can tell you where we are in that, because I think we're getting there, but maybe slowly. So.
Well, and I think we got our foot in the door. We have Commissioner Davis on that sea level rise committee, and so he's helping to represent our interests. But I think what's going to come out of this first round, they are looking at if we did nothing and what that looks like, and that's going to start to define some of the options that we have. And I think the next step, when it does go to council, and I think it's planned to go to council late spring, early summer, is a recommendation that'll come out of there for us to do further study and looking at these, and I think coming up with a similar timeline. Right now, the impacts look like they're out in 2060 when we're going to really start to see those impacts. The investments that we're making here are probably a 30-year investment in Braemar, and so I think we're still within that window of which we're going to be, the next time we go to touch it is how is it going to be adapted to the impacts. And so I think we still have some time, but that window is closing quickly. I think we will need to have some plan by the end of 2030 that really recognizes, as we start touching things that are in these impact areas, what are we going to do about it? So I completely support what you're bringing up, and I think we're on that path right now.
Thank you, Joshua. Yes, I mean, we see that it's going to city council. We say, okay, where can we make input in this if we are? But we all know that this SLR, as it's called, is happening sooner than we thought. And I'm just a little worried that 2030 might not be far enough out. And what kind of thing are possible for El Estero. So that's just our concern. And so when it goes to city council, are they going to be saying, figure this out sooner rather than later? I don't know. So
I think they'll be looking for your input on that. I mean, that's what I was thinking is going to be in the report, but I think you should definitely go and speak and share your thoughts on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
that's... Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to, any questions from anybody else? No? Okay, I'm going to reverse myself probably for the first of many times today. Well, let's just go through C and D, and then we'll do all three of those by one motion. So, Josh, you want to talk about the C?
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about what is behind item C, and it is in recognition of all the work that Water Resources has going on in the right-of-way, really, with the main replacement. And we've just kind of tapped out our internal engineering staff resources. We have Carson Wallert here. He's the supervising engineer, overseeing a lot of our water resources projects. And with just the increase in volume, we are reaching out and having more consultant support services to help. And so this is in kind of recognition of that. I didn't want this to go without some kind of discussion on it, because I think the more we can get the word out, there's going to be a lot more with Measure C passing, a much more constructive work in our streets. We still have a lot of land development projects going on. We've doubled the main project. We just have a lot of work going on in the public right-of-way, and it's beyond, at this point, something that we can handle with internal staff, and so we are reaching out and bringing in consultants to support us.
Mm-hmm. Questions? Okay. Actually, it's kind of a good thing, right?
Yeah.
To ask for more money here, because we're doing more work.
We're doing more work.
Right? That's a good thing. Okay. And then do you have any comments on D?
Not unless you have any questions.
Okay. Questions on item D from anybody? All right. And I'd entertain a motion for a positive recommendation on B, C, and D.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay. Then we will move on to the first administrative item, 6A, and talk about wastewater rates.
So I just want to set the stage here. So this was a presentation we were planning to give last week, and we had our consultant lined up, and So unfortunately, he couldn't reschedule to come back. And so Malcolm is taking his presentation here and running through it. Hopefully, we'll be able to answer all of those questions. We do plan on bringing the consultant back to help present to Finance Committee, which is where this is headed potentially next.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Hagmark. So as he mentioned, we'll be going today through the proposed wastewater rates for fiscal years 2020 through 2022. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be going through. We'll look at where we've come up to today, the revenue requirement and our financial obligations. We'll look at how the rates are actually allocated. We won't go into too much detail, but we'll give a brief overview of the cost of service approach. And then we'll go into the next steps, which Mr. Hagmark noted, going to Finance Committee and City Council, and when the final report will be available. Just a brief recap. Most all of you are here for all of these public meetings, but really kicking it off on June 21st when we appointed an ad hoc committee and going through various meetings where we introduced how we were going to go about setting the rates with our consultants, having discussions about policy input, particularly on December 20th and on February 21st of 2019 this year, when we received input from the Water Commission on our residential classes. And as we talked about today, we'll spend a little more time on the commercial side of things and where we landed on those rates and classifications. Going forward, on April 9th, we'll be at Finance Committee. So the purpose of this study really was to understand what revenue requirements we had in terms of our financial needs, whether those are debt coverage, capital projects, reserve requirements, future standards of treatment that may be coming down at El Estero, and making sure that we have rates in place to meet those needs. Joshua often says this is a leading asset in the city for the public health and the environment, and regular maintenance and investment in these facilities is very important. And then using the study for these generally accepted methodologies, and really we're talking about the standards for cost of service analysis. So briefly, these are the 3 steps of the cost of service analysis and the study, which is you determine how much money you're going to need on a cash basis to fund the wastewater system. How do you allocate that revenue requirement to your different customer classes, which is your cost of service, and then designing the rate so that either you're meeting your goals of volumetric or fixed charges, and also that you're equitably distributing the rate for different needs. So we'll look at the revenue requirement. Really, this is looking at revenues and expenses where our prudent financial planning criteria, which is debt service ratios that we need to maintain, and other obligations that are put on the wastewater system over a specific time period. What you're going to see and what you saw in the rate notice in your packet is that we're recommending a 3-year rate schedule, and we'll get more into that, but it really puts us on a good trajectory to meet needs in the future as well for these 5% increases, and I'll go more into that. And analyzing the utility on a standalone basis, I believe what the consultants are getting at here is we have to support ourselves. We don't have any cash transfers from the general fund or otherwise. We do have some fees, but they're very minimal compared to our rates. So I'm going to build this chart up really quickly about the financial picture for us in the next 5 years. And really what it starts with is our O&M expenses. This starts at a little under $15 million. These are in million-dollar figures here on the left. And it's a pretty steady march. It is probably most consistent with an inflationary factor, salary and benefits, and then general purchases and everyday material supplies and services. So typically you see that just steadily march up to about 17, 18 million in 2024. The black bars here are rate-funded capital. Sometimes you'll hear us refer to this as PAYGO capital. This is actually somewhat steady in the $4.5 million to $5 million range throughout the time period that we looked at. And debt service is something we have to be keenly aware of. If you notice in fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20, fairly stable, those green bars. There's a step up in 21 where we have our full amortized interest and principal payment for our secondary process. We took an SRF loan for that. Then it's pretty steady again in FY24 through 24. What's not on this chart is that in FY25, our electrical renewal project will probably be amortized, and we'll see another step up. So looking through here, these red bars indicate times when we're adding money to our reserves. So we're going to buffer some of these changes in our debt service step up and our O&M expenses. And ultimately, this black line is really where we're trying to hit our revenues. So the dotted line is if we did nothing, where would our revenues be? It's very evident that they're insufficient at their current rates. You fall under your obligations. You start eating in reserves in fiscal year 20. But what it does also, if you look at the trajectory in 24, we're slightly above our annual obligation. We're putting a little money in, and hopefully we continue on that path and we meet that debt service step up in 25 with the renewal project. Sorry, let me skip ahead here. Okay. So the conclusions of the revenue requirement, and you saw in the chart, was we need to do rate increases, and we need to increase our rate revenue to meet our financial obligations. Ultimately, what we're shooting for and what we think we've been able to target is 5% annual increases. Now, what you'll see later on is 5% rate revenue increase doesn't exactly meet that for each customer. Each customer will be a little different. They'll be around the average, but depending on their water usage and the rate structure, it will change for them. At this time, they're recommending a 3-year rate schedule. They felt like going out 5 years was a little too far in terms of the capital projects we have going on and some of our debt service and debt funding needs. So securing those and looking forward, it's more prudent to do a 3-year schedule. So let's go over the cost of service, which is the second component of the study. Really, it's an analysis to equitably and proportionally allocate costs to these different customer classes, and that's where you have to get to. You know how much money that you're going to need to operate the system, but how are you going to determine which customer classes are to pay those costs? And that's what the cost of service is getting after. Things that it focuses on are avoiding subsidies, that the revenues reflect our costs, and ultimately in California, a big portion of this is meeting the proportionality requirements for Proposition 218. The objectives, of course, are: do subsidies exist? How can you get those corrected? And looking at our average unit costs. We discussed this a little in our residential cases with the cap, but it's come up as well in the commercial. So looking at some of the assumptions going into the cost of service, we would need a 5% revenue increase. So how do you get there? What's the rate setting period? It's a 3-year period. And then really there's 3 steps here. And I won't beat you over the head with the complexities of these, but the first step is really to functionalize the revenue requirement. The city's accounting system makes this very straightforward. We do a program and account basis, so you know if it's a treatment, collection, the lab, and management all have separate budgets. So that's a pretty straightforward step for the city. What becomes a little more complicated is taking these functional categories of costs or your programs and breaking them down into these different components. And I've listed them out here. There's volume component, our 3 strength factors, which for the city are really our driving strength factors. Different cities and municipalities and agencies have different driving factors. Our customers, so how many accounts do you have? This relates to billing and management to some degree, and also capacity to demand, which is really about getting a normalized unit to spread the cost over. And once we have that, the third step is just allocating these cost components to our different customer classes. So if you look here, this is really the outcome of a cost of service analysis. And it's a pretty powerful table because it helps you understand all the different elements for each customer class. So if you start with just the first component, cost component, which is volume, you'll notice that they all foot at 100% going across horizontally. But if you had $1 in volume costs, 73 cents of that would go to residential, 18 cents of that would go to commercial, another 9 cents would go to commercial, high, and industrial. And then going left to right, you can see how much of each cost component is allocated to each class. And I know there's a lot in this table, but really for us, this was a very important table to seeing the entire outcome. And at the bottom are our total costs in millions of dollars. Also on the far right, capacity demand, as I noted, it's kind of a equivalent unit for all different customers, and it takes into account your meter, and similar to capacity charges, there's a equivalent meter factor. But really a lot of our costs, what we're saying there, are shared or overhead costs between all of the different customer classes.
I think you'll notice what's a little different than past years is we have this strength component this year, and you'll note that the strength costs are roughly in the $5 million range of our overall budget are related to components of strength.
Thank you. And so here's a summary of the cost of service. As I noted in the beginning, we've shown here the different revenue increase needs we have from these different customer classes. So residential, we need about 2.4% more. And really, this is for fiscal year 20. So this is an adjustment year where we readjust the proportionality between the classes. Some are higher, some are lower than our 5% target. Of course, commercial higher are in the 7 and 7.5 range. But what happens after this year, and just to be clear, is that in 21 and 2022, we will set the rates and then raise them 5%. And it will maintain the proportionality that we've developed here in fiscal year 2020. And just to get back to this and say it again, sometimes we just don't want to confuse that the actual customer bill impacts will vary, and I'll show you some of that. So the results of our cost of service analysis is there are some differences between the customer classes, but they're relatively minor. They're generally around the 5% target that we were shooting for. That shows that the proportionality now is fairly accurate. This recommendation from our consultant, he believes that this is a proportional, equitable rate structure. We have unit cost as well for high strength charges. I think if you saw in your report, this is something we've introduced that's new to the discussion since our previous meeting, and we'll get more into that at the end. So let's look at the rate design. The rate design is really a third step in our study, and some of this you've seen before and we've gone through. So it's based on the revenue requirement and the cost of service. Now for residential, we've brought this to you. Our recommendations from the consultant is to leave the cap at 10 HCF, which is that point at which they're no longer charged for water use in their wastewater bill. Multifamily, we're going to continue ahead with the recommendation we had at the last meeting, which is if there's 2 to 4 attached units, we will be raising their cap from 8 HCF to 10 HCF. The consultants found that their water use was more in line with single-family residences, and so we're bringing those on par with each other. For 5+ attached units, this is something we discussed as well, we still find it reasonable to remove the cap. There's very little opportunities for outdoor watering, and if you are using significant amount of water, that most all of that is probably entering the wastewater system and being treated at El Estero. We did some consolidation in the commercial. If you remember from looking at our fee resolution, I think we presented it before, there were 3 commercial classes, all of which shared the same rate structure and rates. We didn't find any compelling reason to keep that, so those have all been condensed into one average commercial class. We combined our commercial 4, which we're calling now commercial high, and our industrial classes into one as well. So we think this really aligns these classes with their strength characteristics and really streamlines the application of the fees. And lastly, we've developed a high strength charge, and this is new. We had discussed before a separate rate class for septic haulers, portable restroom haulers. But ultimately what we found is that based on industry standards and really with a more scalable approach, you can charge on a per pound basis when they exceed certain limits. And I'll go more into that later, but this is new, but we do find that it's a better solution to what we were looking for. So we can look at some of the rate impacts for our single family users. Excuse me. Here at the bottom, it's a little small, but what you're seeing as you go across is that the rate impacts is less than $1 in FY20 for a regular single-family user. And the volumetric charge dropped slightly in FY20. This is just an outcome of the cost of service. And there's a slight step up in the base fee. Looking at this, I'm going to go through a couple slides comparing us to our neighbors. This is a 0 HCF, but essentially what we're saying there is this is our fixed charge. And to understand Goleta, Montecito, and Carpinteria, they charge once a year on the tax roll, it's my understanding. This has been broken down to a monthly fee, and it's a fixed charge flat with no volumetric component. So this is what you would expect if somebody's not using water, that they're paying a lower fee than our neighboring agencies. Now, as you move up into the 4 HCF, you do increase our rate. Of course, theirs stay the same. They have a flat fee, but we are still a little bit lower than our neighbors. And ultimately, when you're a moderate water user for wastewater rates, at least at 10 HCF, you're right in the pack with our neighboring agencies. So this does promote conservation still. It allows you to pull back your bill. If you reduce your water use, you can also reduce your wastewater bill. This is the multifamily chart table. If I can go around here. If you notice here on this line with 0 to 8 HCF, this is our current bill. We're phasing that out. We're introducing a 10 HCF cap. This is the same as our single family. All the residential have a similar strength characteristic and flow characteristic, so they have the same volumetric component. As well for our 5+ dwelling units, what you'll notice is the 7 HCF cap is taken away, and now all use will be charged. So for commercial, they have a slightly different rate structure, which is you pay the greater of a fixed fee based on your meter size or your water consumption based on a volumetric rate. Now, this table extends, and you can see in the Prop 218 notice, to all the way to 10-inch meter size. But here I've just cut it off for the purposes of giving you an exhibit. What you'll notice here, and I'll show in a chart, is that their bill impacts also are fairly minimal, but they do, and based on the cost of service, we do have to collect approximately 7% more interest in this, revenue in this class. So we'll take a quick look here. This is more indicative of a small commercial business, potentially an office of sorts with a 5/8 meter. If you notice, the first 3 bars there are all the same. That's because it is the greater of, whether it's a minimum charge or volumetric. And at a certain point, your volumetric charge exceeds that minimum fee, and you'll start paying on a water use basis. But relatively minimal increases, $2.45 for the fixed fee. Now, if you're all the way up there and you're using 60 HCF in a month, you will be paying about $18 more under the new proposed rates. We'll look at a commercial high industrial bill impact here. This is a 1-inch meter. Your fixed charge, if you look at that bottom row of the numbers, the fixed charge is the difference. It's $8.50. Jump up there. And if you are, again, like a higher water user at 60 HCF, your monthly bill will go up about $30. So we did introduce a high-strength surcharge. We had previously talked about a septic hauling rate. What we found, though, is that a high-strength surcharge, there are instances where other customers may be discharging in certain instances high-strength loads. And so in order to capture multiple different customers who may be in this high-strength category, we chose to go with a surcharge. In addition, it scales with the different strengths. So instead of being a set rate, this will be based off of quarterly sampling which will adjust based on those samples. So it won't be a flat fee all year or a flat rate all year. It will adjust with the different strengths on each sampling in the quarter. In depending on the different constituents. So if it's biochemical oxygen demand, 750 milligrams per liter, total suspended solids 850, and ammonia would be 90. Because we do know this will be an impact, we did decide to go ahead and look at some of our neighboring agencies or agencies that our consultant knows take septage waste. What we find here is a whole list of different agencies, but there's a dark blue bar there on the right, which is the average. It sits at around 10 cents. It looks like Santa Maria is right at the average. If you look at our current average, which is a small green bar there, that would be our current rate. This, to understand, and based on our high-strength surcharge, there was some averaging used to get to this rate because it's not volumetric, and this is a volumetric rate that we're displaying. Now, our calculated average, which is our new proposed rate, that's on the very far right in the yellow bar, and we're up around 5 cents. So there is a significant increase to this proposed rate and the impacts it could have. But we also find that it's fairly well in line, if not below average, in many cases.
I think it's also helpful to know that not all wastewater plants take it. Goleta does not take it. Ventura doesn't take it. So take high-strength wastes like this. And so in particular related to septic, there is a mix. The cost variations here also vary. Some of these agencies take direct. So a hauler comes and pumps out a septic tank and goes straight to the plant and dumps it. Versus here in the city, we don't have a receiving station at the plant. And so there are different variations that drive these costs. So we don't have the cost of that screening and things like that. So anyway, but it is a reflection that this is a charge, a cost that other agencies do reflect and pass along to those unique high-strength wastes.
Thank you.
Before you get off that slide, so are all three of those triggers in a normal septic discharge?
From what we saw in the sampling, Mr. Chair, it was not all the time that all three of them would be triggered.
Okay.
Yeah, there were times when not all of them would be applicable.
Okay. So you'd have all three of them wouldn't be, maybe all three would be present, but you wouldn't pass the criteria in one or two of them. So you can't just say it's a $1.60 increase per pound going to happen necessarily.
That's correct.
You might not qualify for one of them. You might not qualify for all of them one time, but the next time but you're going to pull this on a what basis?
Quarterly.
Quarterly. Okay.
Our industrial customers are sampled quarterly. And then, of course, we have discharge permits with other commercial high-strength dischargers, such as breweries, distilleries, wineries. And so when they have to discharge waste, they are, under their permit, required to contact us. We take a sample, and then based on the constituents of that sample, they would be charged for that discharge. And so one of the things that I think, in particular, our high-strength laundry facilities in town have, for other reasons too, have all moved to doing a lot of pretreatment on site. And so they fall in the category of high strength, but the pretreatment that they do on site basically takes them below these thresholds. So, and that can be had for any of them. A brewery, for example, can do pretreatment on site, lower the BOD, and therefore not be charged. We don't experience the cost, and they reduce it. So to us, it's we're not looking to pick this up, but this is reflective of a cost that we're experiencing. So if they pre-treat it, great. We welcome that.
Thank you. So quickly, I want to put it all together. I know this has been asked before from the commission. Is what is the combined utility bill for a single-family residence in town? We look at these piece by piece and in different hearings, but what do they look like together? So the first you're looking at is your water your water bill with a 5/8 inch meter. This is a moderate user at 10 HCF. Their bill is going up very minimally. Those numbers are small, I'm sorry, but it's going from $122.88 to $124.44. I think it's about $1.56 in water bill going up. Wastewater is going up just about 54 cents or so in there. And then when you add in your trash and recycling, their bill is going up approximately $8, $8.50. And on the total, what we're seeing is about a $9.50 increase. So for the utility bill next year, about $9.50 increase for a single-family residence. They're using a 65-gallon rolling cart and using 10 HCF. I'm not going to comment on the trash and recycling, but on our side, we've done our best to keep these to minimal increases, and there's further hearings for trash and recycling with the City Council. So coming to our next steps, the recommendation today is that the Water Commission forward these rates as they've been proposed and presented to you to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee on April 9th, they'll receive a presentation, and we would like them to recommend that staff send the Proposition 218 notice. There is a 45-day noticing period that we have to hit, and then we'll have a public hearing on June 11th in City Council chambers. The final consultant report, and right now it's going through legal review, will be ready in May 2019. Ultimately, our requirement is no later than 10 days prior to our public hearing. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Let's do public comment first. So, Mr. Carlson, you're up first. Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Derek Carlson. I'm the business manager for Marburg Industries. And Marburg Industries is here today to request that the Commission not approve the proposed wastewater rates identified in Table 5, the proposed strength surcharge. So this is a brand new rate that's never been levied before in the city of Santa Barbara, and it results in a 730% rate increase to Marburg Industries. And the reason we're asking that the Commission not approve the rates in Table 5 is because the rate setting has failed to meet the transparency objective set by the Commission. The overriding proof for the lack of transparency is that no report from the city's consultant detailing and quantifying and justifying the 730% rate increase has been issued. We've asked on numerous occasions to see the consultant's work that has resulted in the Table 5 results, and we've been told that the report isn't available. We've also been told that the Commission has not received the report either and are being asked to blindly approve the new rate structure. We've even been told that staff doesn't have a copy of the report from the consultant either. So yet with all of the assumptions, averages, deductions, and calculations that are cloaked behind an unseen report, we're supposed to approve and accept a new rate structure and a new rate category with back-breaking consequences. So this presents, in our belief, an unsurmountable lack of transparency to this rate hearing process, specifically to Table 5. The information that we have received from the city is Joshua and Mr. Samario had given us a call on March 7th to let us know that there would be some large consequences to the new rate structure that they deduced would amount to $250,000 to $300,000 in rate increase to us. When we pushed for the details behind that, we were told it wasn't available, but they would give us more information as it became available. On March 15th, what we received was the Prop 218 notice without any backup information or details from the consultant. When asked for additional information, we were told that we would see if additional information could be found. Then on March 19th, we received a 3-page summary from the consultant's report that is probably 100 or hundreds of pages basically detailing the math showing the $300,000 increase or amount that the high-strength discharge would generate. On March 20th, we were afforded the opportunity to sit down with the consultant, who again reiterated his inability to share with us his report. What he did share with us, which was what was on the screen today, was the rate comparison, which he said proved that he was in the ballpark of his rate analysis. Instead of showing it was in the ballpark, it showed the lack of collaboration that was done in the process. What he did not take into account in this report was that these agencies identified here are agencies that accept septic waste where you can back up and deliver it to that facility. In the city of Santa Barbara, we do not have a facility or operation like that. In order for Marburg Industries to qualify to deliver septic waste into the wastewater system, Marburg Industries has had to develop the disposal station, the odor control system, the underground storage tanks that aerate and agitate the material. We have the pre-processing equipment to remove solids and to stabilize the material. We have an electronic computerized pumping system that meters the material into the sewer system in order to obtain the preferred preferred dilution into the system so it doesn't all impact at one time. Marburg Industries does the continued analysis and reporting of what is coming out of our metered system to the city, and we also are responsible for the ongoing operational costs of that. So none of that was taken into consideration on the consultant's report here showing that he was in the ballpark. So our issue with the sevenfold increase in the Table 5 is the lack of transparency in its formation. So either we have no information about what went into the detail of the calculations, or we've seen incomplete information that's resulted in a skewed analysis. So everyone in this process, we believe, deserves to be well informed of the details before a 730% rate increase is approved. And should a septupling of the rates be passed with all of the information on hand to be analyzed, then we believe that a more metered approach in implementing that type of rate increase would be prudent. So for today, we urge the Commission not to approve the Table 5 increases due to the lack of transparency into the rate calculations that has been provided to this body and to those that are affected by it.
Thank you. Ms. Hauser.
Chair Jordan, Commissioners, thank you very much. Hillary Hauser, Heal the Ocean. After that last report, I think we should pay Marburg instead of charging them. Their service is so valuable. But I, too, would like to see this report. I was going to do my little poetic thing about wastewater rates being too low. This $1.93, 5% increase. Did that keep it under the Prop 218 threshold? I have to say, just in general, I'm kind of surprised that the individual homeowners have so. I would like to get a copy of that slide of the cost of service, that the individual homeowners have so much of the BOD and TSS and so forth. The high strength, I was just going to say their increase was way too low. Anyway, now maybe I won't say that. But I think that pre-treatment is really something we should get into. And so this rate increase is based on O&M charges. Is that, I want to not get the answer right now, but my question is the O&M charge based on just what we're doing now? What happens if that definition changes and we get into the pre-treatment issue, Mr. Hagmark mentioned the laundries facilities that are doing pre-treatment. What about the hospitals? What about, some of these industrial strength users of the wastewater plant? We've had issues, been in discussions about the septic haulers, and Ms. Bjork told us when we were in discussion about this that if you put that too high, the haulers can pull over in the side of the road and put it in the side of the road or open a manhole. I mean, she said that that's been done. So we think there should be a tracking system. But anyway, I would like to see the report too. And if I could have a copy of the slide of the cost of service emailed to Heal the Ocean, that would be just great. And the slide that shows the commercial, that last column that's got the 60 under it, who are those? I'd like to see who's that? So anyway, I'd like a little more information too. And then finally, when I lived in Summerlin, our wastewater rates were in half by the year, and Montecito is high, Summerlin's high because it's fewer people sharing the cost of doing business. And it's just too bad the billing can't be separated out, and because when you put all the water and trash and everything together, it's frightening. But if you look and see that you're paying $52 a month for wastewater service, this is such an important service. You can put a sweater on when the lights go out. You can read by flashlight, but you can't live without wastewater service. So I think it's undervalued. And I don't know, it would take a act of God to put these rates onto a property tax bill instead of this monthly billing that's kind of like getting bit every month. Anyway, I encourage the community to recognize the value of wastewater service, and I'd like to see the report too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So it's over to the commission. Questions?
Sure,
Go
I'll
ahead.
start. Thank you. I appreciate the residential caps. I feel like we spent a lot of time and energy on those, and those seem to be in a good place, recognizing the realities that are out there for different meterers. So thank you for that. Regarding Mr. Carlson's comments, we've been talking about these wastewater rates for a significant, almost a year now. And it sounds like Marburg has just been hearing about it in the last month. Can you talk a little bit about the outreach that's gone to all the high-strength users around this?
Mr. Hagmark, if you want to start.
Yeah, so this, it was unfortunate we were unable to connect with Marburg earlier. It certainly wasn't due to a lack of trying to try and get them to the table and talk about where this effort was going. I think one of the challenges that we have every time we go about doing either water or wastewater rates is we are developing a budget, as you know, the budget process, and we really don't have a final budget developed until January, February, and then from there you're rushing to kind of put it all together. Keep in mind that this is all headed towards a hearing in June, so we are already way out there, and of course state law requires that we get out and we notice this ahead of time. And they recognize, even in their language, that these reports that support this can lag because it's just the timing of this. In an ideal world, you'd get the report done and it would go out at the same time as the notice. Problem is it doesn't fit with the budget cycle and everything else. So this report will be out in plenty of time for that public comment to be made. What has been noticed is the highest amount of rates that can be implemented by the City Council. So this is the upper threshold. The council can always adopt something less than this, but this is the upper threshold of what they can adopt. And that rate memo will be made available. Like I said, our attorney's office hasn't had a chance. Our attorney's out right now on vacation. When he gets back, he'll be reviewing this, and our goal is to get it out in May, so that everyone can see all the details behind these numbers. But we do feel confident that we've done a level of detail here that tracks back. And again, this strength issue is something that many agencies are now taking on, because it is, as you saw in the cost, $5 million of our costs are associated with the basis of strength. And so it isn't something that I think we can turn our head and say, oh, they're just base these charges on volume anymore. We need to recognize that there are costs related to what is coming into the plant.
And can you expand a little bit more on that for those of us who are not water scientists? So, like, what does that mean? What does that look like?
What the BOD, total suspended solids. Gayla, do you want to come up?
Nothing in depth, just kind of, for those of us who aren't dealing with this every day. I mean, what are we talking about here? How is this so different from, how is the strength differing from different types of users?
Galen Fair, our acting wastewater system manager and lab supervisor.
Chair Jordan, Commissioners. The strength aspect of the rates is going to be there's different treatment costs based on either total suspended solids, biochemical oxygen demand, or ammonia, and it takes different parts of the process to treat each of those differently. So this is really taking those costs into account. With our new secondary process that we have just commissioned, we are realizing we are needing more alkalinity, more chemicals that we need to add based on the ammonia that's coming into the plant. So that is one of the aspects of putting a cost to those strengths.
I think, for example, they're just treating the ammonia in our waste has added about $500,000 a year in chemical costs. So therefore, that direct cost will go to ammonia. And then, so if we have someone contributing in high level of ammonia, they will be picking up a larger percentage of that 500,000. That's just one example.
If I may add, Mr. Chair, if these rates are adopted any lower than what is noticed, it's not the case that we could recoup any of the lost revenue from that. So if it is adopted lower, it's important to understand that there would be a gap in revenue from that going forward. They would not be shifted to another class indiscriminately. It would require essentially a reformatting or reanalysis of the rate study.
Or a political decision to erode reserves, right?
Correct. So less revenue would almost certainly mean dipping into reserves, which at some point in the future would need to be brought back up.
Where are we sitting right now as far as that goes? Are we maintaining, or are we dipping into reserves, or is the entire city kind of collectively sharing the responsibility or the load of?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kilbourne, reserves are established on a fund-by-fund basis, especially in the enterprise fund. So water, wastewater, solid waste, and waterfront, for example, all enterprise are standalone reserves. So there is no contributions from the general fund, nor do we contribute to other people's reserves. But with that, the wastewater fund is sitting right at council policy. So there is a level determined by the council that you have to have these. From the chart at the very beginning, we essentially stay right there with these rate increases at what we're required to have.
And you mentioned that if we didn't adopt these rates, you'd have to go back to the drawing board and reassess. How would you, based on cost of service, reassess these rates if you were to do so?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Burney, I think a reassessment would first come from what can be cut. So maybe it's not necessarily rates, but it's what can you defer in your capital projects and what types of operating service levels are you providing now that may need to be step back slightly. I think that would be one of the short term. In the long term, we would essentially have to look at the rate study again, run it through at a new cost level.
There's also the opportunity for council to use general fund monies if they wanted to subsidize a customer class or rate structure in order to transition or slowly change from the current rate structure to another. That's another option that's available.
an option, of course, for the next 4 or 5 years is dwindling rather than expanding due to escalating costs on the general fund, right? I mean, I know that's an option, but it'd be a better option 5 years ago. So, so I have, you know, I was part of the wastewater subcommittee, and this, so just, you know, in my private conversations with you, I've been uncomfortable with the characterization that Mr. Carlson had of their ability or their transparency coming to the city, and I've also mentioned that to you guys. And kind of my home characterization would be that I have 2 roosters running around with my chickens instead of just one. You know, you guys are all posturing back and forth on who's going to provide what information and who needs to and who doesn't. And I'm still uncomfortable with this particular section because a lack of a report and not good data on, is it really true that less of these are city customers that are generating this issue than not city customers? And because we don't have that data, and should a city customer be paying for a non-city customer in this particular area? So are more of your porta potties coming from out of the city rather than in the city? And so then why is it even a question that we would try and recoup that? And then again on, you know, the percentage of 730% increase is like a 0 to something because it's 0 now. So I don't know what that means in real day life. I mean, you've put up slide after slide of, in fact, you put my house up there, 10 HCF, right? So I know exactly what my cost is going to be, but what's the details on your typical 1 or 2 porta potty customer at a construction site or a bigger customer? That what is it going to do to that rate structure for Marburg to have to pass along to their customer? And those are the kind of, I mean, you're asking me to reflect on what it's doing to our customers at the commercial and the residential area, but I don't see any data on what it's going to do to these other customers that we're serving in that particular table. And that makes me uncomfortable.
And that's the transparency going both ways. I mean, Marburg doesn't publish their rates on their site. You can't go and look because that was an interest of ours to see and what component this really makes up. There are, I think just to put it, there are other porta potty servicing companies that are paying the fees that you saw up there and septic hauling fees to discharge in Oxnard and down south. So they're already paying in there, and I'm assuming that Marburg is competitive with those folks as far as costs. So I don't see this being a dramatic increase to the end customer. And I think the rates that are in there are intended to make it fair, whether that waste is coming from in-city or from Oxnard or from Lompoc. Those rates there are now, instead of right now, which I feel like our customers are, residential customers are bearing that, this now puts that responsibility on those generating that
We're
waste.
clearly subsidizing it. I get that. I mean, I get that. But I just, I'm not comfortable with the rhetoric yet on both sides on how big or how little the impact is.
I mean, on a $25 million budget, we're talking about roughly $300,000 here, so it's not an exorbitant. But again, we're trying to accurately reflect the cost of service and move in that direction, and that's something we're not alone in. And you know,
So this would go to council in May, right? Initially?
June.
council doesn't see it until June at the public hearing. It goes to Finance Committee on the 9th. April 9th.
So on the back page there, what's that June 11th date down at the bottom?
That is that public hearing. So that's,
That'll be when council gets the presentation on proposed rates.
Right. But that's the first time it has to go to council, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it has to be cooked by then. I guess that's where I'm going.
That's right.
So we have, so would it be possible or appropriate to just talk about this particular table again before that, particularly when all five of us are here and you have the report in hand and probably I could give you 4 or 5 things of more information that I want, put the burden on you to talk to Marburg. Marburg would clearly know those are items of interest to be discussed and have an opportunity to respond to them or not.
Well, we certainly could come back in May and discuss this more. I think today what would be really challenging is if we don't notice. And again, we are noticing the highest rates that can be adopted, and I think that we could come back in May and talk about that, and that could be something that we share with council in June, which is the Water Commission believes that it should be something different.
So it's more appropriately a recommendation to notice.
To notice.
Rather than a recommendation that we're in favor of that particular table,
Correct.
right?
Right.
That's correct. Finance Committee will be recommending that staff notice. So
Okay.
if you're in line with them.
I don't know, that would be all of this makes really good sense to me. I just feel like we've been through 6 months of tensions between us and Marburg on who's got the right info and what the right info is, and I'm uncomfortable with that, and I'd like to see it again. Before I forget, I wanted to tell you that bar chart with the dotted line showing where the current rates would leave you and how you build up to why you need to get the overall revenue was a great chart. That was the best chart in that whole presentation on at least leading me to the point of why we need the big number, and then you can go argue about all the smaller components of that. But just because always the question is, why the heck do we need? Why does the price always have to go up? Well, that's a great chart. That's a great exhibit for how the revenue needs to go up and why it needs to go up. And so I just wanted to commend you on that.
And a point we didn't talk about this time, but I think we brought up before is we're looking for a 5% revenue increase, but we have been seeing a 2 and a 2.5% increase in inflation, just cost of materials, cost of labor, cost of contracting things out. So when you really look at what we're talking about here, it's a much smaller increase in revenue that we're really going for. I mean, that's one of the challenges and why I think we've gotten so much support in the past from this commission is you really do want to make these regular rate increases as challenging and annoying as they are. There are some agencies, just Santa Paula being a good one, who unfortunately stopped making rate changes for many years, and then all of a sudden, it was triple the rates that they were paying. They went from $30 to $90 because they hadn't done any increases over the years, and then they had to rebuild a new plant. They had all these things that ended up, compounding themselves. And I think being able to make those small incremental increases and stay up with it is really key, staying up with infrastructure.
Okay, so what we're looking for is the recommendation in the staff report, and my preference would be that recommendation also include a request to discuss this further with more details related to a report that should be available by then, and better information on customer base, location, rate structure, and how it specifically affects different classes of clients for septic, the high strength wastewater category, and bring that back in May. And if anybody else wanted to agree with that, then
Is that the motion?
I guess I can I guess I can certainly make a motion, and if that sounds good to somebody.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, does that sound good?
Yeah. Sounds
Okay.
good, yeah.
And to be clear, it's just that item of high strength. We don't.
Yeah, is that all right? We could do that in May? I mean,
Yeah.
I want to make sure. I mean,
Yeah.
because I know every time somebody thinks of a great idea, it's like more staff time and money. So
It will be a lot more time, but it's I want to make sure that we've fully vetted this and you feel comfortable with where we are. And at that point, we'll have reached out to all the other high strength users and talked with them as well, because we wanted to reach out and make sure they were aware of this. We're not trying to sneak this by anybody, but and we feel confident with the numbers that we have. So, I'm happy with the discussion.
okay,
I would say let's try and push HDR to have something that we can look at before the next Water Commission meeting, because technically they have till the end of May, which, we would miss.
We will get it before then. Water is a lot more complicated to get through, but I've got a commitment from our attorney that he's going to be doing the review, not outside legal, and so I'm confident we'll get it done
Okay.
earlier.
And I think we could, if there's a a question on what we're really talking about, I think we could do a subcommittee meeting and with Mike and I, and you could invite Mr. Carlson into the room on that too, and we could just kind of sit around and have a discussion more than a, formal request back and forth and formal response or non-response back and forth and what that means. I mean, we have a subcommittee set up just to do stuff like that would be appropriate, correct?
You have to look at what the ground rules are for inviting others into those ad hoc committee meetings,
Okay.
but
All right. Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Thanks for all the work on this. I know it's a mayhem task of numbers and consequences. So, right. We'll move on to item B, the sewer lateral inspection program update.
So, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, this has been a program that's actually been around for quite some time, and it is in need of some updates. So we thought we'd start off with this meeting kind of laying the groundwork for where we are, where we've been, and where we're headed. Today we're not, we certainly don't have all the answers today, so we're looking for your input. And then our plan is to come back in May with hopefully some more refined, and to keep refining this program until we feel like we've gotten to a point where it's really working for our community, and then we'll take something to council at some point here and speak with them about it as well. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Ms. Galen Bear.
Chair Jordan, Commissioners, thank you. I also have Bradley Rare, our wastewater collection superintendent, in the audience. Should you have any questions I cannot answer. So today we'll give you a background of the program and some of the items that we are working towards. Those would be enhanced communication, financial assistance, cost controls, and then what our next steps are moving forward. So before we get into the sewer lateral inspection program, I wanted to give you some background information on our collection system. We've got approximately 256 miles of sewer main, and 90% of those are a small diameter. They're just 6 and 8 inch diameters. The majority of the system are that size. We have over 6,200 sewer manholes, 7 lift stations, 2 miles of force main, which are a pressurized main. And all of this is city-owned infrastructure that the city maintains. Additionally, we have approximately...
Mr. Chair, I think because we don't have a quorum, I think we have to wait till
Okie doke.
Megan comes back. Yeah.
Of sewer laterals, almost 2,500 connections. And the sewer lateral is the portion of plumbing that connects a property to the city's sewer main. And the homeowner is responsible for the maintenance and repair, including the connection to the sewer main, which is the Y or T fitting. In contrast, this is all privately owned infrastructure, so the city does not maintain it, it is the property owner's responsibility. So some of the maintenance programs that the city has for the sewer system is we have a cleaning program, an acoustic program, fog management, and of course the sewer lateral inspection program, which is what we're going to get into today. And what I wanted to highlight with these other programs is the city is responsible for these two programs that you see on the slide, and the next slide are not city responsibility. So we have a cleaning and inspection program. We do system-wide cleaning. We've got root control program. We're doing inspections on the mains. All city staff, well, wastewater city staff, is responsible for the maintenance of this. Additionally, we have an acoustic program that identifies potential blockages in the pipes, helps us prioritize our cleaning resources. Again, city staff is responsible for these programs.
So I want to, I think, just pause for a quick second. So basically, half of the system is public and half of the system is private. We have over the years been developing a pretty robust program to maintain this public system. And I think what we're hoping to do with the SLIP program is help homeowners understand their responsibility in doing similar inspection, maintenance, repair to that private infrastructure. And I think for a lot of people, some don't even know they own this. And so it's a matter of several different things of education as well.
So the two programs that we have that are not responsible, city's not responsible for, however, we are outreaching to these folks. Fog management, we dove into this quite a bit recently with our fog RFP. It's food service establishments are required to divert fog so it doesn't end up in the sewer. And those FSEs are inspected routinely by one of our inspectors. And that inspector is providing outreach, helping restaurants keep the grease out of the system, but it is essentially the restaurant owner or the food service establishment's responsibility to maintain their grease traps and keep the grease out of the system. With the SLIP program, again, property owners are required to inspect their lateral. They're required to repair as needed. And we can do as much outreach as possible, but it is the property owner's responsibility to have this infrastructure maintained. So in 2018, last year, we had only 7 sewer system overflows, which is a fantastic achievement for our crews. They've been out there working hard through all those programs. What I do want to note is 2 of them were debris, 5 were roots. All 5 of those SSOs from roots were caused by laterals, roots from laterals, either from those laterals being cleaned and a root ball ending up in our system, causing a blockage or an overflow. So this is why it's so important for us to bring to light the responsibility for the homeowner, property owner to maintain their lateral.
I think we can say that we have gotten to a point where we feel like we have a good handle on the city's public infrastructure, and we will no longer make any more significant progress without really getting a good handle on our private sewer laterals.
So moving into the sewer lateral inspection program, I wanted to give you some history. So it was developed in 2006, and it was developed to target the failing laterals, increase public awareness on their need to maintain their laterals. And an ordinance was passed in 2006 as the program was being developed, and it was requiring property owners to inspect their laterals under certain conditions. And commercial and residential have different conditions. And then the program started in 2007. And I'll get into what those conditions are shortly. So here's a timeline from start to current day. When we started the program, we had an incentive, which really incentivized the property owners to proactively repair or replace, inspect their laterals. what we were seeing with that, it was wildly successful. So it ended up costing the city had to fund this program, and it was dipping into some of our reserves. We couldn't taking money away from some of the other activities that we wanted to do with our sewer system. So we stopped the program around 2010 for the incentive, kind of put the slip on hold, and we started it back up again in 2013 and reestablished a goal to inspect all commercial properties by 2023. We are no longer offering the incentive or rebates. However, we are waiving any permit fees if a city requires inspection or repair work.
So with that incentive, it was a very popular program, and unfortunately, it was taking away the city's ability to maintain its infrastructure by funding that program, even though it was equally important. And I think most importantly, what we were finding is that construction costs, unfortunately, were escalating faster than normal inflation. And so what we were finding is contractors were taking advantage of that rebate and basically just increasing their costs. So we weren't really getting the bang for the buck that we had hoped out of that program. And so as such, it was basically shuttered. I think there are things that we've now learned over the last few years, particularly related to the maintenance of our own infrastructure now, that we can implement here to help homeowners with those cost controls. And we'll talk a little more about that later.
So the requirements for commercial properties for an inspection, they are required to inspect every 10 years, regardless of the condition. So all commercial properties are on a 10-year cycle. And condominiums and multi-unit residences are included in commercial as well. As far as our residential properties, these are going to be permit initiated. So if there's an addition of 400 square feet or the addition of 2 or more new plumbing fixtures, requires an inspection of the sewer lateral. Additionally, if defects are observed through city main inspections, so if we're out there cleaning and televising our main lines and notice a problem, for instance, you see some roots coming from a lateral here in that picture, we will request a resident to inspect their line. And then lastly, if there's a private lateral spill, obviously there was a reason for the spill, so we want to get in there and see what the cause was, so they are getting an inspection letter. So why is lateral inspection and maintenance so important? Roots and grease can cause issues, broken pipes, separated joints, voids, infiltration. You can see on the bottom picture there that pipe is just fallen apart. So it can cause issues for the homeowner and for the cities. Picture on the right there is very graphic. But you can really see what can happen from a sewer backup in a home. You're exposing sewage to the public health. It's impacting beaches, creeks, and waterways, and private property damage can be very costly. So over the years, these are the number of private spills that we are aware of.
Again, we don't have these numbers, but I would speculate that there's probably 3 times this in actual spills that just the city is not notified about. They were able to contain them on site, and anyway, it's big. I mean, it's significant when we're maintaining the same type of infrastructure, and our spills are a fraction of that.
Does this come from just what people contact the city about? So, like, if a plumber went out and fixed something, you wouldn't necessarily know about it. Yeah.
Correct. So the ones we do know about, we do report to the State Water Resources Control Board. We're not required to, but we like to give that information.
And some of these do make it into storm drains and creeks, and typically when we're called on site, we're out there trying to vacuum it up and clean it up before it has too big of an impact.
This is just kind of a history of the SLIP program since 2014. So over the years, you can see the number of inspections required has really increased. Last year, we had 873 inspection letters sent out. Of those, more than half were repairs were required, and more than half of those included a connection to the Y needing replacement. So you can see the program is really still growing. We have actually, due to this, had to pull back from this year and slow things down so we can really get a grasp on how we're handling it, what needs to change in the program so that we can be more helpful to customers.
Yeah, I mean, the number that this was grown to, I mean, it's overwhelming the staff that we have, and it really underscored a lot of the issues that we have in our communication. And so in 2019, it will drop, but it's not because it's all been fixed. It's because we need to really stop to sharpen the axe at this point. And I think
But that phrase, the program is growing, is uncomfortable to me because that sounds like you're pushing the agenda. What's triggering that is permits or mandatory inspections for commercial properties, right?
And
The triggers are not this. The triggers are the triggers. It's not like you're saying we're out there policing it more. There's just triggers built in that are being triggered more often, right?
Well, Mr. Chair, what we're also finding more as we TV. So as we TV the city sewer main, we're finding roots coming down laterals. So
And that's one of the triggers.
no, it's true.
Yeah.
It is true.
So the more we use more technology in our mainline cleaning, we are finding more. So that you're right.
I guess what I'm
the
trying to say
triggers
is
are
not
the
to
same.
phrase it in a manner like we're the
Program.
policemen going out there to look at it and growing our program. There's a lot of activity going on in areas that have been there for 10 years as a trigger, and it's just triggering it. Right?
They're coming to light. Agreed. So what is the process for SLIP, and why is it so confusing? I had a very extremely confusing flowchart up there, which depicted, it was accurate. It was our process, but the process is confusing. So what we're really trying to do as we're reevaluating is how can we create better communication with our customers and really lay out what the process is. So this is the typical process. An inspection letter, a customer, a homeowner will receive an inspection letter, whether that's from wanting to expand their home through the permit counter, or if we're finding anything in our sewer mains. They receive a letter, and I'm actually going to go through this slide because it breaks them into two. Inspection letters received, so a property owner then has 45 days to submit a video. Property owner will hire a certified plumber off of our certified plumber list. Plumber inspects the lateral. Plumber will then submit the lateral video to the city, and our SLIP coordinator will review the video for defects. So sometimes on this side of the process is a little bit easier. They're required to inspect and get that done. 45 days is pretty sufficient time to do that.
We still struggle with quality of video and things like that, but for the plumbers that are doing it frequently, we kick back their video and they have to go back out and do it again. So they're getting better at this, but that was some of the challenges we had, just being able to clearly identify what we were looking at.
And another thing that we're running into as well is the plumbers will have an inspection report for their video, and then our SLIP coordinator goes in and reviews the video as well. And sometimes our staff will call out additional defects that maybe the plumber didn't call out, so there's confusion for the homeowner on that front as well. So after review, if we have determined that repairs do need to be made, the property owner will receive a repair notification letter. As it stands currently, the property owner has 90 days to make the repairs. Sometimes the repairs will be an entire replacement of the lateral. Sometimes it's strictly a point repair. But 90 days seems to be a pretty tight timeline. A property owner then has to decide on a repair solution. Are they going to replace the entire thing? Are they going to rehabilitate? What are their options? Does it include tying into our main, replacing the Y connection? A lot of question marks for the property owner. Plumber contractor then needs to complete the repair work, and they have to submit proof of the repairs, and the property owner will receive a certificate of compliance. So again, 90 days is kind of a quick turnaround time on that. But that is the process as it exists. So with those processes, we're really trying to get better communication to our property owners and those folks that are receiving these letters to help them with the process. So with enhanced communication, what we've done so far and what we're currently looking to expand is we've hired a public relations firm, Katz & Associates. We're developing a new website specifically for the SLIP page and the wastewater system overall, and improve customer support. So Katz & Associates, public relations firm, they're helping us on a bunch of different fronts with our wastewater rates, our outreach here, and moving towards some One Water concepts in the future. What they're helping us with is they're putting together some informational pamphlets. We're finding that if a property owner receives an inspection letter and that is it, it's a little confusing. So these pamphlets will explain the process a bit better. They're also working on infographics, so depicting who owns what and showing that the property owner owns up to and including the connection in the city right-of-way. I think one of the other ones that they're working on is the life expectancy of the lateral. So a lot of folks know that your roof is going to last 30 years, your refrigerator is going to last 10 to 15, but something underground that you don't see every day is kind of out of sight, out of mind. So we're working on a graphic that kind of puts those familiar lifespans on a graph so property owners can think about that as they're saving up money for repairs on a home. And then the last thing that Katz is helping us with is improved notification letters. Currently, our letters are very authoritative. You must do this. What we're working on is softening that approach. We've noticed a problem. We need your assistance.
I think also explaining the why. Like, I think that was something that's missing from it is why is this important? Why should you care? Why, protecting your family, protecting the community, protecting the environment. These are all the reasons why. Why do you call it a why?
As far as our website goes, staff internally have been working on that. We've got a new site. Some of the elements are implemented on our site currently. We now have a frequently asked questions page, which is really allowing customers come to us and find the information. They can basically go fetch what they're looking for, which is very helpful. A lot of this information was not available prior to updating the website, and we're in the process of doing more and more on it. It's getting better every day. So hopefully that will really help our customers that are looking for data. On the other side, we want to improve our customer support. So instead of just having them go find data, we want to be able to help them have more one-on-one type customer support. Those are going to be in regular office hours, monthly public meetings, site visits with the property owner. As it is now, anyone can come down to El Estero and drop off a video, ask questions, etc., which is fantastic, but it can be disruptive to our workflow. So by establishing regular office hours, say from 2 to 4, property owners know they can come down, get an explanation, maybe walk through their specific inspection video and have where the repairs are called out for them. And it's an opportunity to discuss repair versus rehab or replacement options.
I'm taking a similar approach that we've taken with water conservation. I feel like that's been a successful model, and that kind of personal touch helps to alleviate concerns and break down some of those barriers that can come up when you're told you have to do something.
Monthly, quarterly public meetings. We haven't determined whether it'll be monthly, quarterly yet. This is something that we really want to start implementing. And mostly it'll be informational meetings. Do you know you own your lateral? Stuff like that. And then in addition to that, we're looking into starting a lateral maintenance and best management practices class. So, okay, you know you own your lateral, but how can you maintain it? What's the best way for you to keep that clean and clear of any blockages? And then lastly, site visits with property owners. So this is, as Joshua had just mentioned, modeled after our water conservation. They do a fantastic job with their water checkups. Folks can call. They have a high water bill, call in. Someone walks them through the process. Someone will go out on site with them to find out what their personal issue is. So we want to model this after that program. It offers the individual support that they will need. And again, once we're on site, we can discuss repair versus rehab options. And some of those options have, there are new technologies these days, so that folks might not be aware of. So with all this lateral repair work that we're requesting, it can be up to $10,000, $20,000 to replace your entire lateral, which is a significant cost for someone who, one, doesn't know that they own their lateral, and two, isn't anticipating a cost like this. So some of the options we're looking at: low interest loan program, third-party partnerships, and some cost controls. As far as the low interest loan program, we could offer a loan up to a certain dollar amount, $20,000, $10,000. Haven't determined a threshold as of yet. Potentially could be paid through the water bill or put on the property tax bill. And one thing that we're looking into is having a joint program for lateral repair, installation of solar arrays, or drought-resistant landscaping, and even removal of septic tanks if that is something that needs to be done. So looking at it more from a global aspect instead of specifically for the slip.
This is extremely complicated. I can't say we have any great solutions at this point, but we've started discussions with finance and trying to figure out a path, and we'll plan to bring back hopefully some viable options for more consideration.
Mm-hmm. And some of those challenges, we have some limitations with Proposition 218. We can't use rate revenue as a seed source, so to say, for these loans. There is the risk of default on the loans. How do we get somebody to pay? Are these going to be secured, unsecured loans, stuff like that? And then administration of the loan. Who's going to do it? How much additional staff time is that going to take? So third-party partnerships. This was actually very intriguing. Staff recently met with a third-party utility insurance/warranty company. It sounds fantastic. You pay a monthly fee of either $6 for water or $9 for wastewater, or you can combine. And essentially by paying that monthly fee, you are covered if there is an incident, and it's up to $8,500 per incident, and that is per incident, not per year. So you could have multiple incidents in a year and you would be covered, which is very intriguing. And the fact that this insurance company is backed by the National League of Cities is enticing. However, some of the challenges, it requires voluntary participation by the property owner. So while we can say this is available, they would have to sign up and participate. And the slip might not be conducive to the way the warranty company policy is set up, which is a little disappointing for us. The way we've set up our slip program has been very proactive for us to notify property owners that there is a problem, we need your help. That may void the criteria for the warranty company.
So yeah, that was their initial thoughts, is that, well, since you're telling people we're going to have more cases, and so our warranty would likely not work for your community. And so they asked if we were interested in foregoing our SLIP program, so we wouldn't send anything out. We wouldn't notify anybody. That didn't sound like something we would do. And they had also mentioned, well, maybe there would be a different monthly fee. I think that fee right there is what they charge throughout the state, so for every entity. So I don't know how they would, but they could go through and assess the risk of taking on the city's customers, and it may be, $25 or $30 a month that you'd pay because we have a proactive SLIP program or SLIP.
Does it cost less when you're fixing something you perceive as going to be an issue, or does it cost the same whether it causes an issue? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, would it potentially cost them less if we're catching these before they become huge problems?
Not necessarily. I see what you're getting at, but based on what we're finding, people are having to replace their laterals, so it would increase the number of claims for that.
And then one of the last options that we've been exploring recently is cost control. So how do we keep the cost down for our customers who are getting this $20,000 unexpected bill from a plumber? And one of the reasons that cost controls are important is everybody's lateral is different. Some are much longer than others, some are much deeper than others. So there is a wide range in repair costs. So what we're looking at doing is evaluating some of the repair solutions, rehabilitate, replace, and what those costs will be. So just giving you what the repair options are currently. And again, there's new technology coming through that can bring some of these costs down as well. So point repairs typically are a small repair, excavate a pit, repair the isolated defect. It will repair the defect, but only that defect. And it can include the Y connection replacement. Replacement of the entire lateral. This is your conventional dig and replace the entire pipe. You're trenching through your entire yard into the public right-of-way. Yes, it replaces the entire lateral. You know it's brand new, which is nice and comforting to know, but it can come with a larger price tag. And this will often include the connection replacement. Something else that is an option is rehabilitating. So typically it's just a single pit, maybe two pits at the front and the end, and you can insert a cured-in-place pipe liner. So essentially this is a sleeve that will go inside the lateral and gets cured in place, and that will help with any of the defects that are in the lateral. So prevents the multiple excavations in the yard. However, typically it does not include the connection to the main being replaced. So what we're looking at doing is having an all-inclusive bid that the city would go out to bid and do the footwork on. And that could include all of the following, or just some of it. CCTV and cleaning, a Y replacement, so dig in the public right-of-way, replace the connection to the main, or potentially rehabilitation. All the work would be coordinated with and conducted by the contractor. The city just is kind of putting that cost control in place. And it also offers simplicity for the property owner. They know that here's this price. I know I can go through the city and get this price. Or they can go and get several quotes from plumbers to see what those costs will be. Next steps. So, receive feedback from Water Commission today on what you would like us to explore more. Finalize. We will come back in May with updates on everything that we've talked about today, cost control options, our financial assistance options, evaluation of staff load, and our enhanced communication. Questions?
Thanks. We'll go to public comment. Ms. Hauser, you're up first.
Chair Jordan, Commissioners, thank you very much, and Gail and Pierce, thank you for that presentation. Really great. Kill the Ocean. We've been working on this for years and years. On the educational aspect, I think it's really important to include the fact that to the homeowners, if they're calling Roto-Rooter a lot, it may indicate a problem. It does indicate a problem. It's surprising how many. Oh, it's surprising how many people don't know that. They don't put those two things together. Also, I really think this sleeving service that Lisa Arroyo is offering as a lower price option, I don't know, put her card inside the flyer or something. But anyway, we have already reached out to staff to say that Heal the Ocean will help in terms of trying to get state funding to establish a pot to start with. We were so excited to see the $200,000 a year when it got going, and amazed that it got up to $900 a year. Can we go back to 200 and just leave it there? Because just that program has an educational value itself. Now then, this certified, it's a bummer to see plumbers taking advantage of this. So I don't know how that worked. When we were doing outreach on this, we called plumbers. We knew the reputable one, made a little short list and phone numbers, and then found out that you can be liable in case one of them burns your house down. So I don't know if the city can review bids that plumbers give homeowners anyway. So we will help this fund to work on a financial solution. But meanwhile, years ago when we started on this, I mean, the sewer lateral thing is hugely important. And when Heal the Ocean started, I'll never forget the call that we got one day from a homeowner who said they had a plumber out, they had a Roto-Rooter problem, and found out they had no lateral at all. The Orangeburg thing, the cardboard covered with tar paper, Rob Almy even brought a piece of it into my office. I screamed. So there are places, there are homes where the wastewater is just going through a dirt tunnel. So, but on the ordinance issue, and we've been doing the same thing with the septic system, just hammering on this, that at the point of sale, I mean, just simply can we have we can catch faulty laterals if we just have that. Same with the septic system, but the realtors scream and everybody goes away. But you have to have the termites and other aspects of the house checked before the sale goes through. It's when all the money is on the table, and I wish we could get back to that. I've already offered Mr. Hagmark. I was digging through all the research. Heal the Ocean has a lot of research on all these things, and found this notebook that we had assembled some years ago of all the cities in California that have ordinances, that have sewer lateral ordinances. It's not a big deal. And Petaluma, the cities outside of San Francisco, and so forth and so on. So I think we should review those things and see what aspects can be required, like point of sale. And I mean, it's nice to help the homeowner, and yes, you can't have an unfunded mandate and so forth, but this is an important issue in terms of groundwater pollution, creek pollution, and so forth. So we stand ready to help the city with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sheridan?
Thank you for having me. I missed you last week, but I guess you had to change the meeting date. So you've heard from me before on this. I appreciate Ms. Farr, your manager, does listen. I had a meeting with her, and I felt like a few of the points on there were things I was bringing up. I respectfully disagree on the point that, for me, it all comes down to the why, in a lot of ways. You misrepresent in your report, though, that the city permit fees in instances where property owners are required to repair or replace their lateral, that the fees are waived, because with the why, the fee is not waived. It's explicitly left in there. And we're talking about the commons here. Everybody needs a sewer. And we're trying to put an economic overlay on this that, yeah, the plumbers are going to take advantage of any incentive. That's how supply and demand works. You go out and you find a lot of problems. I spent days researching this. Actually, I've spent years, because I was originally caught up in it in 2013 with the SLIP program. 2015 got a notice, and we took care of that problem. It cost a lot. And then 3 years later, to the date, we get another notice with a photo of the Y. And so it made me curious in 3 years how the Y would just collapse. And then I found out the neighbor across the street, 2 neighbors across the street, 3 neighbors across the street, 1 neighbor next to me, another neighbor down another 4 houses, all had their Ys corrupted. And I want you to investigate whether your aggressive cleaning process is helping to create a problem. So that was one of the questions I brought up. And then I still think, I see you hired a consultant firm. I seem to have lost the independent little article that somebody wrote in about how this very problem of the sewer, and that they were convinced that there's an easy fix with this liner process. And I think it's, just like I said last time, it's disingenuous to push that program when it isn't available here in Santa Barbara. So, at least to the common homeowner, as far as I can find out. And I think you've got the cart before the horse on that one, as far as you can't promote a program that isn't in the regular plumber's toolbox. So that's unfair. It misrepresents what you're doing, and I think it hurts your process here. So the 30 days she brought up is outrageous, to come up with $10,000 to $20,000 in 90 days. I can't do it. So I'm one of the scuffles. I don't want to be. I want my sewer lateral fixed. I'm willing to do that, but I do not understand the why situation. I can't touch the city's main, yet I'm responsible for it. It's incongruent. It doesn't make sense. So I think you need to fix that part of your program. I think homeowners would be glad to replace their laterals, especially if we have this new modern program. But I think when it comes to the whys, you're digging down into the street. We've had months of metal plates on our street. You know how noisy that is every time a car drives by? These are unintended consequences. We have streets that are being repaired nice smooth surfaces. Next thing you know, they're digging into it haphazardly. So it's an inefficient program. If you went block by block with the city's program of their own contractor, I think it would make a lot more sense to the neighborhood, to the program, and to help the homeowner. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's to the commission. Questions and comments? Go ahead.
So I'll have to say I work in this industry, and I think every agency is different on this too. But you know, the fact that the city just owns the main and the street and not the Y is sometimes unique. Some agencies own they own the Y, but nothing beyond it. Some agencies own up to the property line. It is kind of difficult, especially as a homeowner, realizing that you got to replace something all the way out into the street, and tearing the street up is kind of daunting and starts to add dollars to the overall process. It's a little bit easier when you got a water lateral and you know the city owns the lateral up to your water meter, and you don't have to worry about anything beyond that. So that makes it tough, you know, especially since most of the problems caused by roots come in right at the Y. So I don't know if there's a good solution for it. You know, obviously there's lots of options, and you guys are looking at a lot of different things. So, I mean, I don't have the solution either, but you know, you bring up some great points, and I know the city is looking into a lot of that stuff. It'd be great if there was, you know, a set price just to do this work, but every situation is different, and every situation is unique. So, like you said, some laterals are deep, some are shallow, some go, you know, all the way across the street, which requires more pavement restoration. Some, you know, just require more work. So I like that you guys are looking into the different options. It'd be awesome if, like, there was a contractor that was willing to go in, like, say, do 10 or 15, you know, lateral replacements, and maybe you put your name on the list, and then when that list gets full, you know, everyone benefits from it. Or I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas here at this point, but I don't know. I like the idea too. I kind of wish that it had been instituted, the deal with the Realtor Association. Be nice to be able to, like, nip that thing in the bud every time a sale is made on a home, or that way you don't have to worry about it for several years. And then I don't know if there's any way, like, as we're going through, as you'd mentioned too, we're going through our, you know, annual maintenance projects, if there's some way that, I think those are the homes that are being targeted in this situation, because we're going through and we're doing the CCTV, we're taking a look at all the laterals, and then that's kind of triggering, like, oh yeah, we need to get these guys fixed before we go through and make this repair. But if there was some way to, I don't know, put a bid item in the contractor's schedule that's, you know, a little more fair and equitable, that when they're going through, they could bill a homeowner directly for that work to replace their lateral or their Y, or I don't know. I don't know the answer. I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts on this.
I appreciate it. And I mean, I think that's a lot of what we're wrestling with. I know we've had a flurry of letters going out because we've been trying to stay ahead of the streets program. There, you know, really wasn't a street maintenance program for a long time, and now they got money. And so now we're out there feverishly trying to CCTV all those streets ahead of them and notify the property owners so that they can make the repairs before it gets paved. And so hopefully we'll get into a routine and can stay a step ahead of them. But right now it's kind of a mad dash because they've got this money, infusion of money now, and they are eager to make those repairs. And so it is difficult. And I hope next time we can bring back a little more refined. I think what we had intended to do was get some solid bids from contractors to provide those services, so at least the homeowners know, okay, here's something I can go with. You want to call it the white glove service. I can pay the city to handle it, and they'll have a private contractor come in and do the work, or I can seek my own bids and try and do a better, but at least there is, you have something to compare it to when you go ahead and are looking for bids. So hopefully that'll minimize the swings in different pricing.
Yeah, and I think you've got a lot of good options, which I'm sure the public appreciates. I'm going to second Ms. Hauser's point on slip inspection at time of sale. It deals with the education, it deals with the financing, it deals with the ownership. I think that's probably a battle we should have. I think we backed off a few years ago because the housing market crashed and people were a little bit wary, but I think it's probably time to put that back in into our kind of discussion and that type of thing. I am supposed to have a call at 11. I'm going to step out real quick and push it back so we can do one more item, but I know we had to stop earlier, so just a heads up, since there's no actual recommendation here, I'm going to do that real quick so I can stay for the rest. For one more, I got one more item.
So actually,
Sorry, I just real quick, we're going to need all the support of the Water Commission on that issue of the realtor. I think that's going to be a really difficult one, and glad Ms. Hauser brought that up, and I think we have the data this time around to see why. Before I think we had hypothesized that it was a problem, but now we have the data to back up. Here's the size of the problem, and here's why this is really the best opportunity to catch it.
I don't want to be the cup half empty, but actually last year statistically was a bad year in retail in residential sales, all as a result, of course, of the fires and the mud flows. Mm-hmm. But every realtor I know says last year was a really bad year. So I don't know if the housing market is that strong right now.
Mr. Chair, can we take a recess till Commissioner Murray comes back?
Absolutely not. She's just going to step out for a moment and we're going to comment. That's all. So is that okay? Yeah. There's no action on this item other than just comments. So I'm happy you're still putting work in here. This is several months later, and there's still just as many questions as there were months ago. So I just wrote down a bunch of abstract notes. I agree point of sale is the time. I agree that's like the total worst argument we're going to have, though. It seems like we barely survived that ZAR issue with the realtors, and so now we'll just start on another equivalent argument with them. And but I agree that that's the time. The best slide I liked up there was 36. It talked about I don't remember what it talked about, loans and financing and city doing it. And I think you guys need to try and figure out what makes the most sense and start applying some thought resources to it and build that, rather than have 20 little yellow stickies up on a wall and not really know where to apply your energy to. Mm-hmm. I think you're just going to have to figure out what makes most sense to you and start moving on that to build something that either will fly or won't fly. The 90 days seems harsh. I got that. Okay. The letter looks like garbage. Okay, we've talked about that before. Different fonts, all weird, and it's horrible. It's like one of the worst bureaucratic letters I've ever seen. That harsh enough for you? So I think it's incumbent upon us to be as most helpful as we can to let people know what we think, because you think, because you're the subject matter experts, you should be, on what the best practices and methods are for repair, replacement, and maintenance. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about new technologies, you guys better be out in front of that. When you're talking about the second oldest technology, you should be out. You should be able to help me with a conversation with a contractor before I have to rely on that contractor to steer me towards his method that's most profitable, that might not be the best method. That I think we should be playing a role in that. In that slide on 36, I'd love to see either some method that, however that ends up, whether it's I'm doing it on my own or I'm feathering in with a city process, that I think it clearly there has to be some type of financial relief there, whether that's amortize that over my water bill for 10 years. If it was $10,000, that's $150 a month. or it's a parcel tax amortization, whatever you think will stick, and you can sell to the homeowner who might not be there. Funding could come maybe from creeks that you would pay back if they've got a surplus in their reserves. If you were going to involve contractors, similar to, you have some experience with this, or somebody you used to work with did, in terms of solar. But, I mean, to me, it's the labor rate that's probably the thing that you need to negotiate on, because it's like you say, every situation of where the lateral is different, but it's the labor you're going to apply to that difference. So can you get an agreement on a labor rate range, a really tight labor rate range with a set of qualified contractors, and that's all you have to do. And then you have a set of contractors that have agreed to do it for a certain rate, and you refer those customers to them. And every time you show that joint thing with the solar and water conservation thing, I get the feeling that like you're heading towards you have to do all of those. And okay, good, because I would only support an a la carte choice. So you could make all of those available, but if I only need the slip repair, that's all I want. I don't really want to talk about solar or.
Yeah, we'll make that clear. Our intent was to be a program to assist all homeowners with a bunch of council policy issues that I think are
big picture
important.
policies. I get that. Okay, good. As long as it's a la carte. And then I continue to say that the initial focus of everything I just went through should apply much more predominantly to low-income owners, parcel owners, so and high-exposure locations. So known areas where we know we have old laterals out of that clay pipe thing. Maybe they're close to a watershed. Maybe it's just a bad Mr. Sheridan's part of town. I mean, and you can just look up and down the street and see those little squares and see it's just happening all the time. And so that, I look back at that prior program, and I'm pretty sure from an anecdotal standpoint, a lot of people who benefited from that didn't need the benefit, so to speak, that grabbed that $2,000. And I think our initial commitment should be to those people who have trouble affording it, and to those people, maybe a combination of have trouble affording it and are in a high exposure location in terms of consequences when that does fail.
So that's one of those items that will dictate the funding source, because if the source of funding, anyway, it has to be made available to everybody. But I think that's where
I told you about this before, and I don't even know that it still exists. But I have a neighbor who's in their 80s, and on the Mesa, original flat roof over there, those Escher type houses, and they're low income, on fixed income, and they had a roofing problem. The city 20 years ago had a roofing program. If you qualified economically, the city had a program with a contractor with the type of roofing, which is that vinyl seam lay down roofing kind of thing, and they are assessed a payback to the city on their property tax bill. So I don't know where the money came from out of that pot. It certainly had to be under the Public Works umbrella. But to me, and that's as much as I know about it, but to me that's kind of like the starting point for the discussion is somebody made the money available. It was a habitational issue from a social equity issue that we don't want your roof falling down and you can't live there anymore and you're on a fixed income. And so there were all the qualifications that I could check off. You really didn't have the ability to repair it. It was a basic human health and safety issue, and the city had a resource to help with that, and the city was paid back probably at nominal interest at 2 or 3% kind of thing. And that's how I kind of see, if you can just go find the money somewhere, that's how I kind of see this thing happening at its inception, and then maybe it can somehow find the resources to grow where even those that don't qualify economically under that program can still avail themselves of a way to amortize that over a number of 10-year periods or something. Does that make sense? Yep. So, but I have just a little discomfort with this. Is it's kind of like the same report we got last time, maybe, and I'm hoping you'll kind of pick something and start moving down that path, and then see how you can get further down that path and answer some of these questions that are still unanswered here. There's a lot of unanswered questions here. So, all right, I talked way too long on this. So, nothing else? Okay. Thank you. And we'll move on to the renaming of El Estero.
Is just going to throw this out there. I literally at the end of my time. So is that the one that staff needs us for, or do you want us to hear the declaration of stage one?
This is a recommendation.
Okay.
Need you for both.
So,
I can't say.
would you like to make a motion? And then we'll hear the staff report? What do you want to do? Well, would it hurt staff's feelings if we just waive the staff report? And does anybody have a problem with waiving the staff report and just making a couple comments and a motion?
On the renaming?
Yes.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so I think usually on Thursdays, we need a motion for that to waive the staff report.
I will move we waive the staff.
Okay,
I'll move we waive the staff report. Sorry, guys.
second that?
I will second it.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, and then comments on this item. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just gonna get thoughts. Appreciate this. We've been working kind of towards the One Water for a while, and I think this is a really good process and next step for us to really communicate with the community about the resource of El Estero, not just in one aspect, but also looking forward through the community. So appreciate that, and looking forward to having more kind of public outreach around this option.
I like the way it sounds. The logo looks good.
Okay. Ms. Hauser, I have a public comments slip. Do you want to take like 1 minute or?
I'm ready to say yes, let's do it.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, perfect. All right. So I agree also, and I apologize for running out of time with staff. So maybe it's a good thing. So I'll entertain a motion on the recommendation.
I'll move recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Now, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Hooray!
And you can,
I got a few more minutes.
oh my gosh, we could have talked more.
No, I have a few more minutes for the next item.
Okay, so this one's just presentation. So we'll move up to declaration of stage 1 water supply condition.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Water Commissioners. My name's Kelly Dyer. I'm the Water Supply Manager, and I'll be discussing declaration of Stage 1 water supply condition. I will be running through this fairly quickly, so I apologize. I may actually skip some slides. But we will be going over drought status, demand status, status of water supply sources, water supply planning and strategy, and then our recommendation. So we've had above normal rainfall for the year, which has been good news for our surface water reservoirs. At this point, the federal drought monitor is showing our areas not being in a drought. This is based on climate conditions, and I would like to remind everyone we've had the 7 driest consecutive years on record in the Santa Barbara region. So while our climate conditions have improved, our water supplies can take several years to recover from the drought impacts that we experienced. Our demand status, we're currently seeing a 35% reduction for the month of February, so that's great reduction, and the 30% 12-month running average. So the community has continued with this extraordinary conservation levels. Our water sales have actually dipped down in recent months, and we are projecting to end the year a little bit below what was planned. That's all being factored into our budget discussions for the next fiscal year. What we're seeing is that the Tier 2 and Tier 3 water use was actually coming in less than what was originally assumed in our rate study. Water supply status. So Gibraltar is full and still spilling, and water quality was pretty challenging after some of the storms, but it has now cleared up. So we have been diverting consistently, and actually the diversions have been up to our full limits that were allowed on a monthly basis. So that's been really great to see. Kachuma Reservoir is currently at 77% of capacity, about 150,000 acre feet. The city's portion of that is about 8,400. That's a combination of carryover from last year plus the 20% allocation from the Bureau of Reclamation. And the status is actually outdated at this point. We had requested a 100% allocation. The county supported that request, and the Bureau of Reclamation issued a final determination of a 100% allocation for this water year. So that did come through. Kachuma's storage levels are at about, 77% full, which is not, normally we would like to see Kachuma being totally full. It's when we consider the beginning of a potential drought or dry period. So we do our supply planning based on a multi-year period, and if you look at Kachuma's storage levels where they are right now, if they were not to go up anymore, then we would expect that the levels, if we had subsequent dry years, that the levels may go back down to around 100,000, which is where we start seeing reductions in our Kachuma allocation. So, we're not counting on a full allocation from the Kachuma project for several years in our planning period. And we expect that reduced allocations could happen within 1 to 2 years if dry conditions return. State water current allocation is at 70%. San Luis Reservoir is currently spilling. Although there's no risk of the city's water spilling, we were able to get our water out before there was any loss to spill, and we also did an exchange with the city of Solvang to try and save their water. And Article 21 water is available, which is water that becomes available during spill, but we are not able to take it because our state water deliveries to Kachuma are still interrupted. CCWA is working with Reclamation to try and get that resolved as soon as possible. We are no longer going to be seeking supplemental water purchases for our own demands this year, but we are looking for opportunities to pay down our water debt, which is currently at about 3,700 acre feet. Groundwater levels remain low. We did have an in-depth discussion on groundwater in previous meetings, so I'm not going to go over that. We do continue to monitor our seawater intrusion and water levels regularly. We're resting the basins, although we are planning some maintenance on one of our wells this summer, so we will have to run one well for about 3 to 4 months to do rehab and maintenance on it. Full recovery of the basin is expected to take 5 to 10 years. That's based on our observations of water levels after the last drought. And we are initiating a pilot study right now to enhance the recharge to the basin by taking treated water off of our distribution system and injecting that into the groundwater basin. So we will be working on that over this summer. Desal plant continues to operate in full production. It is a critical water supply for the city. And even as we move out of the dry conditions we've been experiencing, the desal plant still has a role for us in the drought recovery to the extent it can help us to offset use of our groundwater basins and help those basins recover, and also to pay off some of our water debt. Recycled water plant is still in production, meeting all of our customer demands, and we still continue to work through legal remedies to address the capacity issues, which that has not yet been resolved. So our water supply strategy is based on our long-term water supply plan, which was adopted in 2011. We are planning to update our long-term water supply plan and kick that off next fiscal year. But it is a strategy document. It looks at long-term supply and demands through 2030. It sets the policies for how we manage our supplies, and it has a drought planning, how we manage our supplies during droughts particularly. The city also has a water shortage contingency plan. That's a state-required plan every 5 years. And that's where we outline 3 levels of water shortage and how we're going to achieve the demand reductions that we would need at various levels of water shortages. And I'll go through those a little later. So our updated water supply strategy, I would like to first mention, after the last drought, we did not see a rebound in our water demands to what they were before the drought. And I think we would expect that to be the case this time around as well. So even though what we're planning for here from a supply perspective is based on pre-drought demands, we don't actually expect that to occur. What we're seeing also is that there's no water shortage. And so assuming our demands were to rebound fully in May, we have sufficient supplies to meet all of those demands. We're encouraging continued conservation and extraordinary conservation because that would help us with not having to use our groundwater and helping the basins recover. And it would also help us free up state water where we could use that water for repayment of water debt instead of having to have it delivered for our demands. We are planning to continue to operate the desal plant at this point. We've got the light blue is Gibraltar and the dark blue is Kachuma. So these projections assume dry conditions would return, so we have very limited supplies from Gibraltar. And then for Kachuma, we have a 100% allocation this year, and then primarily what's in future years is our carryover, and as well as I think I assumed an 80% allocation for next year. It's uncertain what our allocations will be in future years at this point. So, summary of our supply outlook, no water shortage projected for the next 3 years. Some supplies will take several years to recover with our groundwater replenishment. We have to repay our water debt. And there's also fire impacts to Gibraltar water quality. While we've had an improvement in the last month or so, sometimes it really depends on how the rain falls and how the inflows occur to Gibraltar. So there's some uncertainty on what, we just don't really know what to expect in future years on that. And so with all of that said, continued conservation and desaline operation will help us recovering from those long-term impacts of drought. And then finally, while Kachuma is not full, subsequent allocations may be reduced if dry conditions return. So what does that mean for our water shortage contingency plan? We have a full allocation from Kachuma, although we are uncertain whether dry conditions will return, and we may if Kachuma levels are going to decline in the next couple of years. And we've also got issues with some of our supplies that still are in drought recovery mode. And so what we're recommending is a stage 1 water supply condition. These are all of the conditions outlined in our plan, where we'd have stage 1 is a 0 to 15% demand reduction, stage 2 is 15 to 25, and then stage 3 is 25 or more. So we're no longer in an emergency condition, which means that we can rescind the stage 3 emergency resolution, which established drought water use restrictions that were included in the packet. We could revise that to a stage 1 condition and encourage the extraordinary conservation on a voluntary basis. So we are looking for a recommendation. This would be going to council on April 9th for them to adopt a resolution declaring a stage 1 water supply condition and repealing resolution number 17017.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had this down as a presentation, not a recommendation.
We are looking for a recommendation today. Yes.
So, comments from commissioners? Go ahead.
Appreciated the framing of this as climate condition versus water supply. With the drought specifically, when we're talking about water supply, yes, we've got more supplies, but there are still some concerns specifically around groundwater, and conservation is still important. Even though I will support going back to a stage 1, but I don't think we should. I appreciate your emphasis on conservation. I think we need to stay there, and as a community, it just gives us more options going forward if we can maintain a lower water usage as we go. One comment on the staff report on page 3 under recycled water, it has the plant was shut down periodically in the summer. So periodically can mean occasionally, but it can also mean regularly occurring intervals. So I think that periodically is the wrong word for that. It also didn't, that was pretty serious. It kind of just like glances over the fact that there's those issues with the recycled plant. You could even just take out the word periodically. I think that might help it overall. But we do continue to have issues with that recycled water plant. And I think that's something that people should know because once again, when dry conditions return, which they will, that's a vital resource for us. And it hasn't been a reliable, vital resource. It's been a problematic resource. So just again, kind of getting back to that idea of conservation and continued habits. But yeah, it seems like everything's in place to take a breath, which is nice. So thank you very much for the effort that went into the planning, putting this together.
Thank you.
I just like that there's no red bar in that water supply chart anymore. We don't have to fight whether it goes at the top or down below. So it's nice to see that.
Actually, I missed the red bar. So I get this. They get to stage 1. We clearly qualify. But I don't like the bar chart now because it references a return back up to 15 or 16,000 acre feet a year as if we could use those yellow sections of groundwater. I know you get the second little thing there where you do the little thing over there and say encouraging whatever and it'll take up this much. But to me, the first part of that slide before the little red part comes on just totally misrepresents. I don't know. It gives me opportunity to say, hey, I can use more water, and I think the yellow sections and the protection of the 5 to 10 years of replenishment of groundwater still remain an important enough component to not even put those on the next 2 water years. To just say, hey, they aren't available. We need to. It would take going out of this category of stage back to a stage 2 or stage 3 to put those yellow bars back in there. And so if you're going to call it a stage 1 condition, then you should actually take those yellows out of there and say, if we're in stage 1, we're not going to use our groundwater. And that would really reduce those back down to whatever, 12 or 11,000 acre feet, something like that. And the other part about just the display also has to do with recycled water. So you're meeting it now, but there's a deficit coming in the summer, right? You won't be able to meet the demand that would be out there for recycled water, right? When it comes to summer hot watering.
Well, we'll see how much it comes back. So far, we've been working with our customers to reduce their usage. A lot of it is parks and schools, and they can't afford our recycled water at this point, so that has helped bring it down, but I think if they could afford it, they would use more.
So I guess my suggestion would be at the point where that starts, you're only producing whatever that was, 1.5, 1.7, but the need is 2.3, that 0.6 should be showing somewhere else on those bars because it's kind of just as a kind of a highlight that it's coming from somewhere else, and it shouldn't be, and we should be reminded of that every month. That there's a reason behind that, and that's part of your negotiations and litigation, and that should still be a priority to resolve in our favor because that should have been water that was available and not have to go out and get it from another source. Megan?
I was just gonna say, I think that's part of the bigger policy discussion we have with the long-term water supply
Okay.
plan, right? Like, I think
I don't know.
where that water comes from, and there's been requests for more recycled water, but we've put them off because we haven't been able to, we've barely been making them. So I
Yep.
think that's kind of a bigger policy discussion. I agree with your point, though, about not using groundwater during stage one, not planning to use groundwater right now. I think that's a good point. To remind people that we really need to rest our groundwater basins, and then that would encourage more conservation, even
So
at a
maybe on
smaller
your
level.
maybe on your presentation, spend less time on the first part of that slide and get to that part where the red part jumps out there really quick, right? I don't know.
Commissioner Keller did send me his comments, and he was in support of and wished we could have landed with a 20% conservation. And his points were that is likely where the community probably is going to be. Even if you lift all this stuff, he doesn't see people going down that low. But I think the point is here, we're moving to a stage in which we need to, what I think we're sensitive to is when we need that kind of enhanced conservation, we need our community to step up, and we don't want to abuse that with them. And at this point, we are in a position that we do have more water. I'd love community to continue to conserve, but we do have more water, and we need to recognize that move. But at the same time, it could come back in a couple of years, and at that point, we need you to step back up again. So.
You and I quibble over that. I just think it allows too much mischief. I just think, there's so much of that top part of the bar there that I think is not conservation talk anymore. It's just reality, and it shouldn't be a question of coming back to conservation or not. It should that number, the top of that bar should just be lower as a matter of baseline now, rather than it's 20 points of conservation and we need 10 more. No, the 20 points should be the baseline normal now and expected, and then the conservation should be on top of that. So it's I think we're just
Well, I think,
different way of phrasing, getting to the same place.
and I think what will help is, the commission has already approved a budget this next year that has $500,000 in there, and we're moving forward with the update to our long-term water supply plan, which will allow us to use a different number than now, because it's kind of odd to show something different when we have a plan that has 14 in it. So, but I share your concerns with that, and
Okay.
I think we need to get that addressed
All
on
right.
that path.
So
I would
entertain.
say
Go
real
ahead.
quick, along
Sorry.
those lines, I was talking about if we're moving to the stage one, I talked about a voluntary participation. Do we need to say that, or can we just say we're stage one and continue to conserve? I don't know. It was like a couple slides back. I don't know. I just didn't like the way it was worded. So
This,
It's always been.
Yeah,
It's always
bottom
been. It's always been quote
How about we
unquote
just
voluntary
encourage
anyhow, hasn't it?
continued
So
conservation. Does it have to be voluntary if we're in a stage one?
Yes, stage one is a voluntary stage.
Okay.
it means, yeah, we're not going to be all those additional rules and actions that people have taken, and they may continue to practice, which we would encourage, but if they're not doing them, we aren't going to be going out and issuing fines or NOVs if there's repeated actions.
Okay.
So
okay. Entertain a motion to recommend.
We'll make a motion to.
Oh,
Thank you.
could I just make one note? In the staff report, there's a professional services for legal water rights, and the Water Commission had already reviewed that item a couple months back, so that's why I didn't cover it in the presentation today. But it is going to City Council, so I think I had already included in the staff report that you made a recommendation to approve the increase in the legal services contract for water rights. And so today we just would need the recommendation on the stage one declaration.
Okay. Good.
Yes.
You second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That passes unanimously. Are there any subcommittee reports today, or is that just a placeholder?
Yeah,
Okay.
just placeholders.
Then we'll move on to your report.
I think the first one, as Commissioner Bernie's walking out, is the cancellation of the April meeting. I think given the fact that this has slipped, we do not have anything pressing at this time for April. And if the commission so agrees, I'd like to go ahead, and our next meeting will be in May. Wastewater manager position closes today, and so we will be moving forward in April to do interviews and hopefully have someone selected by May. And then, of course, the ceremony for the celebration and completion of the secondary project and the renaming of El Estero. We're having a media day on April 22nd, and we hope all of the Water Commission can join us for that. It is 10 to 11:30 on the 22nd. And with that, that concludes my comments. Before you is the packet for just updating you on our supplies, but you just got a presentation on that. We currently have 3 sewer spills this year, which we can go over in more detail in the next meeting. We will also be presenting to channel keepers at the end of the month our annual report. That annual report then goes to, we make a presentation to Water Commission typically in May. Water Commission to Council in May. And then at the Water Commission's discretion, we can bring back and have further discussion after the fact with the Water Commission in June or July. All right. Any other questions, comments?
Nope. You good? You good? All right. We'll be adjourned then. Thanks.